Welcome everyone to my new Sandbox build here in Planet Zoo. Today I am starting up a brand new zoo in Sandbox mode, which means this is just going to be pure creativity, no management worries, just going to be building out something awesome today. So this zoo is going to be a little bit different from the standard and loads different from my current franchise series. The franchise zoo, which is Wildlife Trek, is a commercial zoo. It's focused on making money, focused on the animal management, focused on getting guests in the zoo. This Sandbox Zoo is going to have a backstory and some lore associated with that. As you can see right now, I'm terraforming out the map a little bit. I don't play on flat maps anymore. I just can't stand it. So I like to get a little bit of elevation going, putting in a creek here that's going to run through the heart of the zoo. So as you can see from the title of the video, this is going to be called Wild Mountain Lodge Animal Sanctuary. So it's not going to be a traditional zoo, it's going to be more of a wildlife sanctuary. It's going to kind of toe the line between the two. Animal welfare and education are going to be the two main focuses that I'm going for here. The setting is a North American taiga map. It would be set somewhere in the western United States, probably in the Cascade Mountains of Northern California or Oregon, because that's where I set all my zoos. It's an area I live close to, not actually in the mountains, although I want to get back to the mountains. So the backstory is that this property would have originally been a hunting lodge. Then it would have been turned into a game farm where exotic animals were raised to sell to other facilities, roadside zoos, animal trainers for use in movies, etc. It's recently been purchased by some wealthy individuals with the goal of turning this into a world-class animal sanctuary where the former game farm animals, retired circus performers, zoo surplus, or confiscated pets can live out their lives in as natural a setting as possible while providing education to the public on the issues facing each species in the wild. So education is going to be a huge focus. I'm going to do tons of custom education signage, going to have real world facts and everything. If they would give us custom billboards in this game, that would help so much, but we're going to do it with the in-game assets that we have. So right now I'm starting to build out my entrance plaza here. This is going to be a very rustic feel to it, so I'm using a combination of the New World wood wall pieces, the dry stone wall set from the East Asia pack, and the classic slate roofs. I want it to feel like this property has been here for a very long time. These buildings are old, they were built a long time ago, they're a bit weathered, they've been refurbished, but we're keeping the rustic charm of this. So this zoo is going to be organized in a zoographic manner, meaning that animals that are found together in nature will be housed near or with each other. There's going to be quite a few combined habitats, so species that can live with each other will be housed in the same enclosure if at all possible to give them that extra enrichment. Even species that don't necessarily get the enrichment bonus, but are compatible in terms of their range and their habitat and their diets. One of the ones that I like to put together are the red pandas and the pangolins. They go together really well, so we'll be doing a combined habitat for them in this zoo. It's going to be sectioned off into a couple of different sections, a few different loops. We're going to have a North America section, an Australasia, tropical and temperate Asia, and African section. We'll have tropical African forest and African plains. Also going to have in the middle of the zoo a very large, very rustic, old-style barn that would have been, this would have been one of the pieces that would have been here on the property originally. That's going to house the shelter for our llamas and camels. Those would have been some of our former game farm animals that would have remained here on the property that are going to continue to live here. We're also going to have two very large elephant areas. The elephant enclosures are going to be toward the back of the zoo. They're going to be very hilly, very expansive. The elephants, both African and Asian elephants, they'll have each their own section. These would have been former circus animals, so here in the United States, recently banned the use of elephants in circuses. Ringling Brothers has gotten rid of their elephants, finally. This Wild Mountain Lodge Sanctuary would be a place where those retired performers would come. They wouldn't no longer be performing. They would just be able to live out their lives, integrated into as natural a herd situation as possible, given as much space as possible. Elephants are one of those animals that are kind of problematic for modern day zoos. It's kind of like the polar bears, the cetaceans, and the orcas, the dolphins, whatnot. There's some real world welfare concerns when it comes to housing elephants in captivity. They're finding the AZA keeps updating their welfare requirements for animals. A lot of zoos are finding out that they just cannot meet these requirements. They can't meet the space requirements for them. Elephants are one of those animals that travel almost constantly. They're very nomadic. They walk something like an average of like 30 miles a day. In a zoo setting, they can't really do that. And being as large an animal as they are, they can't move enough to keep their joints healthy, to keep their feet healthy. So zoos that are able to house elephants still are redoing, renovating out their elephant enclosures, providing them as much space as possible, ideally giving them multiple enclosures that they can move throughout the day, giving them some choice, some more mental stimulation. They're extremely intelligent, and the more intelligent an animal that is, the harder it is to keep them happy and healthy in captivity. So I'm starting to work on the foliage here around the lake that is our entrance area. So this is a North American taiga map. I'm going to use planting that is going to be native to that area. So right now I'm putting in a lot of ponderosa pine, a lot of black spruce, and a lot of quaking aspen. I love that we have aspens in the game. I just love aspens. They're such a neat tree. They're kind of unique because they grow in colonies. So each tree is not a distinct organism. They're actually part of a colony connected by their root system. So each aspen grove is its own organism, which is something that I find really neat. Starting to put in a lot of the rock work here. This is going to be rocky, hilly terrain, so loads of big boulders. So the way I plant up my landscapes, I like to work in layers. First, I start with the biggest rocks. Then, once I have the rock work in, I'll put in the trees. Kind of went with the trees first a little bit in this one. But once I have the trees in, then I work on the larger bushes, the larger shrubs, and then the smallest planting. I'll focus on one plant at a time usually, get that put in, and then move to a different plant. I'm not focusing strictly on the taiga biome plants because they're a little bit lacking, so we'll be adding in uh, some temperate plants as well as a couple of the desert plants. The creosote bush, which is supposed to be a strictly North American desert plant, works fantastically well in this type of forest setting. Brings out a little bit of color, kind of mimics the buckbrush or the ceanothus plants that we would have that we find up here that are just kind of a ubiquitous shrubbery. And you can see already taken what was just a completely blank map, and it's starting to come alive a little bit. This is the point in the building where I get a little excited. It's starting to look the way I want it, start to see my vision come to fruition just a little bit. And remember, when you're building like this, if you're building out a forest like this, vary the amount of plants. It's not going to be uniformly lush. There's going to be some open areas, some bare spots. The trees are going to shade out the grass quite a bit. So the denser the trees, the less grass you'll have underneath, the more soil. Actually, the more usually pine needles. We don't have a pine needle terrain paintbrush. I wish we did. Getting started on the lodge that gives Wild Mountain Lodge its name. So this is going to be a very rustic, very old building that has been here for a very long time. Building it out with the same New World wood pieces and then the dry stone pieces. was looking at a couple of different reference photos for what I want the lodge to look like. Getting the main facilities in here. So the ground floor that I'm building out right now, it's going to have a restaurant and the gift shop. The second floor would be a hotel. Probably not going to detail out the full interior. I'll at least do the restaurant and gift shop interior. The second and third floors, though, will probably just be implied from the outside, because I could probably spend 10 episodes just building out the lodge, but I really want to get into actually putting in some habitats. Sometimes the buildings want to sink into the ground a little bit. They get it's like they get detached from the main grid for some reason, and you go to put them in, and they end up like halfway into the ground. Not sure why it does that, but you can fix that by turning the grid height down and just manually adjusting them. So I decided to push the entrance back under what's going to be a elevated walkway, or a balcony. Balcony, that's the word I'm looking for. What's going to be an exterior balcony. So at this point, the lodge build is getting pretty big. Try not to let it get too out of hand, although when I start to put the roof on here, start to see the full scale of this. But I want this to be a very large lodge building. It's going to be the original hunting lodge that would have been here on the property. Very old and very rustic, so using the same slate roof. So it's going to match the building style of the buildings I already have put in. And it's going to be the real centerpiece of this build. So all the buildings that are going to go in after this are going to match the same style. They're going to have the same feel, look like it was built kind of the same time, maybe in the 1920s. And as I'm building out this roof, I kind of start to realize maybe this is a little bit too big. Go ahead and try to push through it, though, just to get it to a point to see if I actually like what I've created here. At this point, I'm a little bit more ambivalent toward what I've built. It's just not quite working out the way I want it to. Decided to keep pushing through, though, to get it to some sort of fruition here. So getting the roof completely put in. I'm not doing any sort of custom roofing. I know a lot of people like to custom build their roofs. I'm not one of them. I like to try to use the in-game roof pieces as much as possible. It just saves me a little bit of time while I'm building this out. It also helps save on piece count. As I said before, my system isn't amazing. It's a little bit on the older side. I do have a 1660 graphics card, which is pretty good, but it's the rest of it, the processor, the CPU, is starting to show its age just a little bit. Doesn't tolerate the super high piece counts anymore. So at some point, get to the point where it just starts lagging really bad, where it won't load really easily, but I'll replace it when it comes to it. Okay, I thought I lost some footage here, but I didn't, so that's good. Everything is right with the world. So I did a little bit of research, pulled up some different reference photos, and then decided to drastically change the design of this lodge. I left this part in because I wanted to show that it's fine that even if you've built something that's big, it's impressive, if it's not working, don't be afraid to tear it out. Put something else in. Do it over. Whatever you have to do to make it come out the way you want it to. Especially when you're in sandbox mode, there's absolutely no reason to keep a design that you're not 100% satisfied with. So I decided the roof had gotten completely out of hand. What I did is I looked up a couple real-world lodges that I wanted to base this off of. One is the Bright Angel Lodge at the Grand Canyon. The other is the Ahwahnee Hotel in Yosemite Valley. I know the Ahwahnee Hotel, it's been a source of inspiration for some other Planet Zoo builders before. There's a reason for that. It's an incredible, impressive old building. So I'm basing the design off of that. It's not going to be an exact recreation, just getting some ideas, getting especially some ideas of how to deal with this roof, because it was just completely way too big, out of hand. It needed change. So the Ahwahnee Hotel in Yosemite National Park here in California was built, I believe, in the 1920s. It's got these really impressive stone columns around the outside of it. I wanted to try to replicate that using the dry stone, the buttress blocks. So the Ahwahnee Hotel in Yosemite National Park. It's a really impressive old building. It was built, I believe, in the 1920s. Got these impressive stone columns around the outside, so I wanted to try to replicate that a little bit. It's not meant to be an exact replication. I'm just using it for inspiration as a jumping off point. So what I'm doing here is I'm building out a custom door. I didn't like any of the doors that we have in the game. They didn't quite fit with the kind of grand entrance that I wanted here. Just going through a few different set pieces, trying to find something that would work as a doorknob. I believe I settled on one of the New World fence posts for this. Yep, there it is. That worked really well. Doorknobs. Could have left it like that, but I wanted to make it a little bit more impressive. I got the Angry Archer off of the workshop here. It's a scale item. It's built to the guest height, so you can drop that in your game if you don't have guests in, or it's an area that guests can't reach. You can just to make sure that that whatever you're building isn't way too big or way too small to fit the scale of the game. So I wanted to build out a custom railing for this upper balcony. The Ahwahnee Hotel has these very rustic style balconies and railings around the edges, so I wanted to replicate that a little bit. Going through trying to find some of the different log and branch pieces that we have in the construction tab, see what would fit best. I ended up going with these African branch pieces. Rotating them a little bit just so that they're not too uniform, to kind of break up the pattern just a little bit. And it turned out to be a nice little rustic railing there. Putting the same rafter support beams on the lodge that I put on the entrance building. Making them a little bit darker in color. Just want it to be a little bit of a visual contrast to the lighter wood of the building. We'll have darker trim going around and the darker rafters. Attention to detail is something that could take a good build and make it into a great build. So I decided to widen out this one wing here. The real Ahwahnee Hotel is more of a Y-shaped building. I decided to keep this more of a rectangular build, makes it a little bit easier. Any kind of diagonal walls or anything has to be broken out of the main group. I prefer to keep everything as one group as much as I possibly can. I know it's a little bit limiting, but it's how I prefer to build things, especially big things like this. It makes it easier if I decide to move it at some point. Also makes it easier for blueprinting it to put up on the workshop. And what I'm going to do with this build, every building that I create, I'm going to blueprint it and put it up in the workshop as a set. So this will be a rustic lodge set. Hopefully be a complete set by the time I'm finished. So it'll be the staff building that we saw earlier, this lodge, which contains a restaurant, so your food shops, your gift shops, restrooms. Every building will have power and water. I'm going to build out an animal hospital in the same style, and then custom shelters and custom covered viewing decks as well. So it'll all be built out like this. There'll be a couple other custom buildings around the zoo, as well as the big barn. I'll be building that out. Hopefully possibly not the next one. I think this one is starting to run a little bit long. So the next episode will be finishing out this lodge, detailing it out, and then detailing out the entrance plaza fully. Beyond that, then I'll be able to move out to start working on some of the habitats. So I'm not going to be jumping straight into habitats in this one. This episode, there's not going to be any animal going in or anything like that. Main goal is just to get this lodge as finished as possible. So tweaking the way the large stone columns meet the roof, making sure that all the eaves are added in, just little finishing touches, fixing a couple holes from where I duplicated out some of the building pieces. And then building out the third story of this building. So again, I'm using the slate roof piece from the classic theme for those, combining it with the New World and the East Asian theme for this build. Selecting and duplicating like this saves you a lot of time when you're building something large like this. So at this point, it's really starting to come together. I can see this building becoming what I want it to be. The original design just wasn't working out, but this is much, much more successful. So I'm duplicating out the stone columns on either side, then duplicating the windows across. So each window would represent probably one hotel room. I'm not going to detail out the full interior on this, just the ground floor, so the restaurant and the gift shop will be detailed. The second and third floor where the hotel rooms would be, I'm just going to leave blank because that would just be, the piece count would just be insane for that. I have to do way more custom pieces than I would want. So the Wani Hotel in Yosemite, it got a little bit of news in the last couple of years. They had a big trademark dispute with it. The vendor who was running it, their contract ran out. Park Service was going to find a new vendor to take over the management of it. This whole bunch of ridiculousness. Actually, some copyright laws that were written like back in the 1920s. This agreement that whatever concessionaire was going to take over managing the hotel would have to also take over the intellectual property, so the trademarks, all the logos and everything. They got that settled. They did actually rename the hotel to the Grand Yosemite for a little while, but it's finally been settled in court, so the Awani, it got its name back. Trying to remember to work on the back as well as the front. I have a tendency to do half the build, the guest-facing portion, and then leave the rest of it blank. I'm going to try to not do that quite as much here. I'm going to actually finish each piece, make it a full, a fully realized set piece. So I'm edging out the building with some darker wood beams. I briefly played with using one of the log pieces there, but it didn't seem quite right. So I want this darker wood, again, to offset the lighter wood of the New World wall set. Decided to put in some actual functional windows down on the ground floor, because again, this is going to be fully detailed out. Custom foundations, again, using that East Asia wall buttress piece. Getting the window frames worked out with, again, that darker wood. Really kind of sets it off, makes it look great. And what I've done on one part of the building, duplicate out to finish the rest. And again, for the restaurant side, I wanted to put in these custom windows, so I'm just duplicating what I've already created, moving it over, making sure I work on the back of the building as well as the front. This is going to have some outdoor dining space off of the back, so that's what that big plaza there is going to be. So at this point I've decided that that awning with the slate roof coming off the building there just wasn't working out. Still trying to toy with it, decided it just does not look right. Take it out, duplicate over this balcony that I've made on this side, and moving it across. And then same thing with the railing, because I've already made it, just duplicate it across. The advanced duplicate move tool is really your best friend for a build like this. You get a lot done, a lot of custom pieces made without having to actually make every single piece. So if you're doing a custom wall, make one wall piece, duplicate that a bunch. Once you've got it into place, rotate certain pieces of certain walls to make sure that it's not completely uniform, to break it up a little bit. Getting all of the windows put in and all of this darker wood trim. think it's really starting to come together at this point, really starting to look like an impressive building that you would find in this type of setting, in like a national park. So I wanted to add this door that I made onto the other side of the building off this one wing here, so just duplicating that across. And then on the back side as well, I wanted to have a similar balcony accessible by a door, or at least implied accessible by a door. So at this point the windows are almost completely in place, and it's starting to look really great. Getting the final windows and final pieces of trim in place on each side for the third story. These would be the upper rooms. These would be something like the presidential suites, the really high dollar ones, while the ones that are lower down would be a little bit, I don't want to say cheaper, because staying at a hotel like this would cost certainly quite a bit. This has been an extremely fun build. About finished with the main portion of the building. Have a little bit more to do to get it detailed out, so obviously still have all the interior to do. A lot of the detailing on the outside, but the meat and bones of it are in. It's coming along really well. Gonna get some custom planting going around the outside, some planters, some hanging items, some lights, some railings along the ground. That'll all come in the next episode when I finish detailing out the entrance plaza as well. And then from there I'll get started on some of the animal habitats. So you have listened to me talk for a good half hour, and I greatly appreciate that. Bravo if you've made it this far to the end. I really appreciate it. If you've enjoyed this, please give this video a like. Feel free to subscribe if you want to see more content from me. Again, this is just episode 1 of the Sandbox series. There's going to be loads more to come. This is going to be a huge zoo, so it's going to be a long series, and I am looking forward to it. So thank you so much for joining me here today. I will see you in the next one.